Today I decided to give you guys a ranking of the Iron Man films. This is a series of movies that started in 2008 with the first MCU movie, which was Iron Man. The character has been featured in several films, such as the Avengers movies, as well as Spider-Man Homecoming, and briefly The Incredible Hulk, but I'm only going to count the movies that he's featured more prominently in. So there's going to be 4 films total on this ranking. I've already done a ranking of the Avengers movies, which you can find on my channel, so this is going to focus more just on the strictly Iron Man films, which is why they won't be on this list. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting with Iron Man 2. This movie is just a mess, and I just don't really care for it. Now, there are good aspects to the film. For instance, I actually think that Mickey Rourke plays a pretty good villain in Whiplash, and I actually do like his motivation and his character. There's also some really fun action towards the ending of the film, and I really do like the racetrack fight scene, as well as stuff like the suitcase armor. But the film has a really awkward dialogue. There'll be scenes where like 2 people or more are talking at once, and the voices are just overlapping. I guess they were going for like a more realistic conversation, but it's really annoying. You can't really hear what the hell anyone's saying. This actually happens at a few moments during the film, and I always hated that aspect of it. Another problem with the film is that it just has a lot of lackluster story elements. Like there's this one where Tony finds out how to make a new element, and his dad basically gives him the keys to do so, but all he really does is take a map of the World's Fair and blow it up into 3D, and then he knows how to make an element. It's like the dumbest way you could possibly describe making an element, and it makes no sense. There is an interesting plot line about Tony potentially dying, so he has to find a new way to power his arc reactor so he won't be poisoned. And I did like that aspect, but once that's pretty much solved, 2/3 of the way in, the movie just kind of loses steam. There's next to no tension, and they already know they can beat Whiplash because he did it earlier in the film, and it's just a really mess of a movie. I don't hate it, but it's definitely the weakest of the Iron Man films. Up next, we have Iron Man 3. Now, this film also has a lot of problems, but I do think it's an improvement over Iron Man 2. For one, I think the villain is a little bit more of a threat this time around. While MCU humor I think is just too heavy these days, I do actually kind of like some of the ways it's handled in this movie, and I actually found myself chuckling a few times. I also really like Tony's little kinship that he has with the kid that he meets, and it kind of shows that he really would make a good father, and it is believable later on when he does become a dad that he would be good at it. He's not perfect at it, and giving the kid candy and pretty much letting them work on weapons. But all in all, it is a fun little dynamic, and I did enjoy that. I do think the film was a little hokey towards the end, especially with his girlfriend blowing up the bad guy in the final act, and them trying to rescue the president and tons of Iron Man armor. It really is a mess of a film at times, but I do enjoy this one, even though it is kind of messy, much like 2. Not a bad film, but I do think it could have been better, but an alright entry to the ending of the Iron Man trilogy. Coming in at number 2 would have to be Captain America Civil War. Now, I won't feature any Avengers movies on here, but Captain America Civil War is just as much an Iron Man movie as it is a Captain America movie. Hell, they even have about the same amount of screen time. If you like the Captain America films, or even the Avengers films, this is one of the best ones. Not only does it feel like a sequel to Captain America 2, it also feels like a legit full-blown Avengers movie, and I really enjoy it. I really like the dynamic between Cap and Tony. I like how they have disagreements, and originally stems from Cap working with Tony's father, who Tony never had a great relationship with. I love the reveal towards the end that the Winter Soldier was the one that killed Tony's parents, and that leads to some really interesting drama. And the fight between Tony, Winter Soldier, and Cap is downright awesome towards the end of this film. I do think the airport fight is still a little overly silly, and I don't feel like anyone's in real danger. Yes, Rhodey does get injured in that fight, but I always felt that was just kind of a silly fight that had no real stakes or consequences. It's a damn shame, too, because that was supposed to be the centerpiece of the movie. But I feel the high point as far as action goes is actually the fight at the end between Bucky, Cap, and Iron Man. A very enjoyable sequel to Captain America Winter Soldier, and a great conclusion at the time to that era of the MCU, pretty much wrapping up phase 2. An enjoyable film through and through, and one that I do like, although it is a little bit rough around the edges, and I do think that the whole conflict between the two sides of the Avengers probably could have been talked through, but it is cool to see all the other heroes fight, and it's also cool to see the introduction of Spider-Man as well. It's just a good movie all around, even if it is a bit bloated and a little messy. But number 1 would have to be the original, 2008's Iron Man. This film not only kicked off the MCU, it also kind of showed that you could take a lesser known hero such as Iron Man and make him an A-list star. There's nothing wrong with the character of Iron Man, but he was not really a household name until this movie came out. And after the movie came out, and that first trailer showed up with Ozzy Osbourne's Iron Man playing, and I just knew I had to see this film. It was just a great kickoff to the MCU, and probably the role that really put Robert Downey Jr. on the map and made him a household name. He had been doing many other films in the 80s and 90s and had a lot of drug problems after those films, but this film put his name out there and basically saved his movie career. Not only that, we got one of the coolest and most badass heroes in Iron Man and a badass movie. The basic story shows this playboy, eccentric billionaire who gets kidnapped by this terrorist organization known as the Ten Rings and has to escape with his wits and the help of a friend he meets along the way to build an Iron Man suit. Once he escapes back to civilization, he builds a more advanced model and starts going around the globe stopping terrorists while also having to stop a threat known as the Ironmonger, who is a former friend of his, who basically loses his mind. It's a very straightforward story, but I think that's why I like it so much. I really like this one too because all the Iron Man effects, for the most part, are actually in camera. There is CGI, obviously, but for several shots in the film, the suit is actually there, apart from when he's like flying around, for example. But anytime Iron Man's pretty much standing there with a suit, they actually went practical. As the films went on, they had a lot more CGI, and I didn't really care for that. And you can just tell when he has a CGI suit on. The CGI still looks good, mind you, but this original film, it still looks the best, which just proves that practical pretty much beats CGI any day of the week. Don't get me wrong, CGI is great, but it's definitely overused these days, and I think that this film is an example of how you can blend them perfectly together. It's still a great film and my favorite of the series, and one that I really love. And I can't recommend the original Iron Man enough. Well, that's my list. Let me know your list down below if you'd like. I really do enjoy the Iron Man films, and I do hope one day we'll get like a reboot and they can like start over. But as it stands, it's gonna be hard to beat this. Even though there's a couple of weaker movies on this list, I still do love these films, and I really hope that Robert does a good job as Doctor Doom. I thank you all for watching, and peace out.